Good afternoon and welcome to the Black Dispatch. Are we excited to have someone on with us today? And I think you ought to be excited too. We have Senator Robert Peters, who will be speaking with us about the various pieces of work that is going on with the Black Caucus. And what's so important for you to understand about this young man is that he is actually the Senate chair of the Black Caucus. So I think that's like I want to grow up to be like you, Senator, someday. You know what I'm saying? So it's just absolutely magnificent to have you on today, and we're going to take a little time for a moment just to give our audience a sense of what we want to cover today. We want to talk to you about your vision as the Senate chair, because I think understanding the role of leadership in the context of the work that gets done on the Illinois from a statewide basis is critical. We know that you have some particular perspectives on that, and we want to hear those. We also know that there's been a lot of work that's been transpiring with respect to the four pillars, which are seeking to address what you've identified and others as kind of systemic challenges that the community has experienced. And we want to talk about the opportunities and barriers that you see in realizing the vision that you have for the communities throughout the state. And because we're planners, we're always thinking about solutions. We don't want to just focus on problems. We want to focus on solutions. So we want to lift up some of those solutions. And so that's what I think is going to be our agenda today.
That sounds great. And thanks for having me. And I think Hubert wants to say something. I don't want to interrupt him, but I'm excited to have this conversation and talk about not just the legislative process, but I come from community organizing. So the idea of the community-based process and how those things tie together.
Well, Kirk, it's a pleasure. I just wanted our viewers and our listeners to have a sense that when we're talking to State Senator Robert Peters, his district covers Hyde Park, Kenwood, South Chicago, some of South Shore, and Woodlawn. Am I getting it correct?
Yes, it goes all the way up to Streeterville.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so I didn't realize that. Let me also say that there are places that Kirk and I have hung out. Pearls?
Yes, that's right. That's not in my it's not Pearls, I believe, is not in my district. I think that's Maddie Hunter has Pearls.
Oh, is that Maddie Hunter's?
Okay.
Yeah, that's over
just
west of King Drive. But I know Pearls. Yes, that's a
yes, Medici's.
Yeah.
Medici's?
That's definitely in the heart of my district. That is, yeah.
Wait a minute. So wait a minute. My question now, Hubert might be misinforming me, Senator. He told me that Chicago Chicken and Waffles is your district. Is that true?
That is in my district.
Okay, because he messed up the first one, so I just want to get that right.
Yeah. So my district is essentially, if you want to think about it, south of was that 55, I believe. South of the highway is along King Drive.
Okay.
That is my district, really. So if you think about it, King Drive is really sort of that border.
Okay.
And then it cuts in at Washington Park. You cut in, it goes down like Cottage, and then it zigzags all the way down to the Indiana border.
Oh,
a very
wow.
long district. So from 100 and something in near the Indiana border, all the way up to I think that's the beach over in Streeterville. It stretches along the lakefront.
Yeah. That's
Got it. And Pearls is just a couple
blocks.
Really
excited to hear me talk about geography, by the way. I'm sure everyone listening wants me to talk specifically about streets, the lake. It's really the most exciting part to talk about.
Well, and let me just say, Senator Peters, that we've been reading up on you as a young man, as a young politician, and you have a really interesting background. I don't know how many people know about that background, and I just found it really fascinating. And I wonder, how much do you think your constituency know about from whence you came, which you come?
I mean, it's complicated. This is a larger story about. I believe it's important for me to inform, as a city member, that everyone tends to focus on their alderman, to tell them about who I am as a state senator, and to sort of break through the noise that is whatever's happening at City Hall. So I would say that it's not as much as I would like, but it's something that I sort of keep pushing on, and that is letting people know who I am, where I came from, what I'm fighting for. And so I always say I feel like it's my job to be open. So I tell people, if they ever want to tell me I'm doing something wrong, that my office is open. They can tell me I'm doing something wrong. I won't be offended. My job is to put the public in public service, and to be able to have that open door and have that conversation with them. So I will say, because I come from Hyde Park, I grew up in Hyde Park. There are some people who don't necessarily like that sort of Hyde Park thing on the South Side, the complicated thing. But people in Hyde Park, I feel, know very well my story. I think more and more folks in South Shore know my story, and I think where I'm constantly trying to make sure I push and inform people is in that South Chicago, East Side, and as well as Streeterville, to let them know that yes, I may be from Hyde Park, and we're closely in South Shore and Bronzeville, but I represent the whole district. So whether they're in Streeterville and I come up there for a farmer's market, or I'm doing a tour down on the east side of Chicago, that I will be there. I'll be an open book, and I'll let you know who I am, and that I got to represent the whole district. And even though there are sometimes I make decisions that some people don't like in the district, I'm going to tell them I'm making that decision, and they can tell me, I think you're an idiot, and that's okay. That's fine. That's the job of a public servant.
And we're going to interview someone from East St. Louis, and I know that you represent them too, so it's okay.
No. East Side. East St. Louis. Well, this is interesting that you say that. So I'm guessing, are you interviewing Senator Bell or Representative Greenwood, or is it just? Well, so let me just say this: as the chair of the Black Caucus, my general thinking is a couple of things. A, I got to represent the entire caucus. I got to fight for the caucus under the dome. The other part that I think is important is when I push that green button on the floor on a vote. Anytime I'm pressing a vote, that decision impacts everybody throughout the state. So I have to represent my constituents in the legislation I fight for, making sure the services that they get, but to understand that anytime I vote, that vote is not just for the 13th district. That vote impacts the entire state, and I have to take that into consideration as an elected official. Is that I can be selfish about who gets me elected, but I can't be selfish about what it means to craft good policy for the good of people.
Right. Excellent.
So let me just say that I was drawn to a statement that you made, and Kirk and I, as urban planners, we're always talking about systems. And this statement that you made, I found to be right on point. So I'm going to read it for emphasis, and that the listeners can hear what you said. You said, "We are in the midst of three interconnected crises that are shining a light onto the systemic injustices that Black communities in this country have been aware of for generations. We have a public health crisis caused by COVID-19 that is revealing the massive gaps when it comes to Black healthcare and treatment. An economic crisis that has highlighted how years of disinvestment and austerity have ravaged Black communities, and a public safety crisis that has proven that we have a tiered, inequitable system of justice that does not apply equally to everyone." And another quote that, as the baton was passed on to you, Senator Chris Belt said, "I know he will continue the fight for social equity, diversity, and inclusion for Black communities." That's why we're talking to you today.
And what I would say, Senator Peters, is that's a hell of a charge. I mean, you've lifted up three interlocking, complex set of issues and systemic kind of questions that take a lot. And you know, one of the things that I'm fascinated by was the caucus's kind of, in some ways, responding to the very thing that you were lifting up as you were coming into your leadership role. That is this idea that there are legislative initiatives that we must work on to begin to chip away at those systems that are not serving the communities, our communities that we're supposed to be representing. And we and Hubert and I are very, very much committed to really understanding the work that's happening under the four pillars: the criminal justice pillar, the education and work development, the economic access and equity and opportunity, and then the fourth pillar, healthcare and human services, because we think in all of that is, in that pillar work, is these opportunities to get at some of the systemic questions that you lifted up as you were assuming leadership. So I guess one of the things that we want to talk about is connecting your vision to those pillars and the vision of the caucus to those pillars. And what were you thinking about in the making of those pillars, right? And how did you prioritize what it is you wanted to focus on, and what do you hope to achieve? I mean, I think there's a lot in there, but I think the pillars themselves represent a really significant promise that we want to examine.
Yeah, so let me first say that Leader Kim Lightford deserves like most of the credit for the foundation of this vision. When there was this crisis, she said, "I'm going to make this declaration, and we're going to boldly go for it." And I think what makes it so fascinating is that even when we were in Springfield, the amount of doubt amongst a lot of people existed, and Kim, as well as Leader Maddie Hunter, Senator Chris Belt, Senator Sims. I can speak to the House as well. I should do that. Representative Justin Slaughter and Sonia Harper and there's just so many names. Jackie Collins. But mainly it's the fact that Kim said we're going to see this crisis, not waste this crisis. And I think it's important to understand that that's not a negative thing. When there's crisis, there's opportunity, whether it's you see that from Rahm Emanuel, you see that from Milton Friedman, and you see that from Toussaint Louverture, right, with the idea of the Haitian Revolution. So when there's crisis, there's opportunity, and with that, you've got to go out and get it, because if you're going to come out of pain and hurt that we had in 2020, you can't just sit in pain and hurt. You've got to transform that pain and hurt into true policy change. So I don't want to be someone who just says, "Look at me, I did all this great stuff." What I focused on was particularly on the criminal justice space, because in my mind, when we have a crisis, too often in this country, we throw the hammer of criminalization at that crisis. And sometimes we conflate race blind as being as fighting systemic racism, when in fact it just sort of sticks to the status quo. And that the challenge for many of us, especially when you're a Black progressive legislator, is that to highlight that criminalization is being used, it's because it's the one tool almost everybody knows as a public safety or as an administrative tool, and it doesn't have to be. You have to sort of craft and lay out the vision for other tools to deal with crises. And so, I think the fact of the matter is that on the economic pillar, right, we had capping of interest rates, particularly from payday lenders, healthcare, maternal health, Black maternal health, leading the way, was a huge, huge accomplishment. The freedom schools that you see from Kim Lyford, all of those are what you build on top of something as you reduce the criminalization of something. If you keep criminalization, nothing else is really going to improve, because people will continue to use the easy, cynical hammer that is criminalization. So I sort of said my energy and my focus is going to be on that. And then for me, I come from community organizing, and along with a whole bunch of folks, helped start the End Money Bond Coalition. So the other part about this is, I like to say that we have to attack things at the intersections. So you heard that in that statement. Same thing goes with money bond. Cash bail is a tiered system of safety. It sits at the intersection of race, class, and gender. If you go to 26 in California, you see someone, it's usually a Black woman, trying to bail out their loved one, because they're then spending their own money to give to an institution to try to bring someone home who they rely on for their money and that they love. And so when you look at cash bail, it's not actually built on public safety at all. It's built on who's allowed to be safe and free and who's not. And so if you keep a system that says that that wealth is a determination of your freedom, then no matter what other system that you build around it, you've already got a huge flaw that's going to drain our communities, break up our communities, and not do anything to actually improve people's well-being. And I would say that no matter where you live, if you live in Norwood Park, you live in Mount Greenwood, you live in Inglewood or Austin or Hyde Park and South Shore, if you have that system, it's not doing anything to really improve people's lives. It's all that does is create tiers, and it's a truly de jure form of segregation. And to me, I think that everyone deserves to have public safety. Everyone deserves to have a good life. The pillars are a huge, important systemic foundation to lead to that. And if we've seen anything coming out of 2020, this summer shows that there's going to be a reactionary fight to what we've done, where people are sick and tired of what the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus has done. And to that, I say, you're just upset because what we're trying to do is bring equality, equity, and justice to everyone, including the people who may not be happy.
So, Kirk, so much of our work and our practice is, going into the community and listening to the community in terms of, and I like to say this because this is how we framed one of the questions. When you get up in the morning, what are the challenges that you face? And this can be anyone. It can be the state senator, or it can be the person who was incarcerated and now is home. So in terms of the community, how do you see the role of the community playing in the implementation of these pillars that you just spoke about?
Well, so y'all can't take this the wrong way as urban planners, because I'm about to say a line, and you're not allowed. I'm saying right now, I'm putting my foot down. Not allowed to take this the wrong way. I think that too often, for the last 30, 40 years, people relied on a technocratic, top-down approach to policymaking. And I'm saying that to you all as urban planners because we know the challenge in urban planning is it's often very technocratic and
top down.
And top down.
Exactly.
So to me, I try to say, before I move any legislation, I ask myself, are there organizations doing this work? Why should I recreate the wheel? They are doing this work. They have bases. They have people they represent, people they work with, directly impacted people run it. So I say, okay, they're working on it. My job is to be the conduit of their work in Springfield. So almost every bill that I work on has to have a truly deep grassroots organizing component. It has to involve directly impacted people, and they have to be part of the process. I try not to say to agree to legislation, without saying I need to talk to my people. Now, what we do know is that organizing on the one-on-one isn't going to always guarantee that the whole community knows. That's complicated. And I come from organizing, so in our belief of power, it's like a triangle, right? So at the top, it's organizing people, organizing money, and then organizing narrative. What we know is when you have my politics and my skin color and the world I come from, sometimes organizing narrative is not where the strong suit is. Narrative is being developed by folks who have a lot of money and a lot of influence, but you try because you need to organize narrative to organize a mass group of people. But I, at the bare minimum, believe that legislation needs to be led by organizations doing the work on the ground. And my job is to work with them and figure out those spaces and be that conduit. And then on top of that, I need to be held accountable by them. And there are times where I've worked on pieces of legislation that I haven't been able to get done. And, in all honesty, I do feel horrible. It's painful. And I've been yelled at, and it sucks. It sucks to be yelled at when you can't get something done, when people have that expectation. And then you say, okay, well, this is a two-part job. I need you to go out to do this, and I'm going to do this, and we're going to try to keep pushing. But yes, the idea is that the community, as much as possible, leading on legislation is something that I firmly believe. And I try not to be a technocrat because technocratic politics has led us to this crises to begin with.
Right. Well, let me just say, Senator Peters, yeah.
Allow me to be defensive, please.
You were not supposed to be defensive. He told you can't be defensive. And secondly, I was going to really put us in a different space of the traditional planners.
So let me just say that all my work right now is in the Black community, and I can't be top down if I'm working in and for the Black community, right?
Now you got defensive. So here's the thing. So let me just, Senator Peters, let me just say, in our collective defense, one of the things that I didn't say in my introduction, we didn't say, we actually teach planners. We teach in a graduate program in planning, and we teach a course that is called Race, Class, and the Just City. And it's all about what do we need to do as planners in appreciation of the racial history and the economic injustice that defines our democracy, as it were. And I think so. One of the things that I think is critically important about this conversation is you're right. Planners have historically been the problem, have been a major problem, and continue to be. In terms of their neoliberal approaches to planning that have continued to reinforce the kind of inequalities.
Oh, we're dropping the neoliberal word here. This is where we're going.
That's the intellectual part, okay? I had to just, I figured you'd appreciate that as in your political economy space, as an organizer.
I think I brought up the Haitian Revolution de jure as a word that
Exactly.
I learned that 5 years ago. So it makes me sound real smart, but it's something I learned recently. And I think I brought up technocratic. So we already know that we're talking to like the Harris School right now.
So let me. I think your model, your paradigm for organizing and thinking about the role of community is just fundamental, and it's so essential, and it's what we say to our graduate students. If you don't start there, you're going to replicate the problems of the past, and you're not listening to the affected communities. You're going to miss the mark. It's already hard enough to understand, but when you end up not talking to the right people, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
And let me add, as both an organizer and someone in a position of governing power, it's important to emphasize that you're in governing power. There's also a job to move community. When I say organized people, organized money, and organized narrative in terms of the structures of power. This is how you know I'm like deeply from an organizing space, because that's how people talk, and people are like, oh my God. But power is necessary in the world. Who has power is the conversation that we need to have. Being in governing power and having the quote unquote bully pulpit means that you are not just there to be reactive to the community. You need to see yourself as saying, I have a vision. I would want you to buy into this vision and to move the community to buy into this vision. It's one thing to say, I have a vision and you have to do it. It's another thing to say, I have a vision and I want to have you buy into it. I want you to believe in it. And so even if I'm with an organization and let's say they have a base and they can get 100 people to go knock doors to talk about housing. Well, we know 100 people is not the size of a 50,000 person community. It's just a relatively small size, still large, still a big organized base, but still relatively small. But when you go knock doors to talk about that issue, it's one thing to ask somebody, what do you think we need on that issue? It's another thing saying, I have a vision and the status quo has a vision. And which vision do you buy into? And to then move people and to say that person's a yes in on the vision. That person's definitely a no on that vision. That person's a maybe. Can I convince that maybe to buy into that vision? And then it's to challenge people in the community to say, you are buying into this vision. Join me in fighting for this vision, because you're not there just to be ecstatic. And too often the way we look at whether it's organizing or politics, it's the idea of we want you to spend hours doing this. But some people don't have it. What does 5 minutes a week look like for you to buy into this vision? And I think that's constantly the challenge, and that's the constant challenge of movements. It's constantly the challenge of turning away from the status quo. So as you point out, the status quo is sort of this neoliberal, individual, technocratic space. That means that a lot of people, that's the world they know. That's all they know. And that's not their fault. For me, when I was coming out of college, was the Great Recession, the way I felt that was, I'm the failure that I can't find a job right now. And it took someone to have a conversation with me to move me to say, you're not a failure, when after the Great Recession, 50+% of Black wealth disappeared. That was literally used to bail out the financial industry. 50% of Black wealth. That's not my fault. That's a fault of an institution and a structure. The fact of the matter is, as a student coming out of the Great Recession, all my loan debt is supposedly my fault, but I was told in the 90s and early aughts that the only way I would succeed is in college, stuck within a contradiction that says that I need to go to college, but you'll also be saddled with a massive amount of debt, and you'll be saddled with no job, and you won't be able to afford a house. And it's all of a sudden now on my fault. And the only way I'm going to get through that is if I grind it out and I somehow succeed. When at the end of the day, much of it is driven by luck. And that some people are lucky and they need justification for their luck, so they say they work hard. But in order for me to have seen that needed to be pushed, needed to be moved. And so as someone who was a member of the community, specifically as just Robert Peters coming out of college during the Great Recession, an organizer sat down with me and challenged me on how I would think about my place in the world and what this world means for me, and what is my job and my responsibility to change that. And once I learned that it is not, I have my responsibility, the individual responsibility I have is to increasing and improving the collective well-being of people. And the one way to do that is to make sure that tiers of who gets to live the life that they deserve are reduced, and that people, no matter where they live, whether it is East St. Louis, whether it is Springfield, whether it's Rockford or Chicago, deserve that right. I mean, this is there's a town in downstate Illinois named Centerville. I don't know if you guys know about it, but it is going through an economic crisis. People's homes are being flooded consistently with sewage. And so you have some people on the east side of Chicago who struggle to breathe the air and have water. They're mostly Latinx. You have people who are Black in Centerville who have to deal with sewage flooding. And to say to them that they have to overcome their situation individually is offensive. There are systems in place that said that one place is okay to dump dirty air on, and there's systems in place that say one place it's okay to fill their homes with sewage. and then lock them in to long-term mortgages that they're stuck with, and then blame them for it. We need to reduce the idea that bootstraps exist and that they're a model for anybody, particularly a Black person in the United States, to be able to get by. Bootstraps don't make the difference between Jeff Bezos and us, right? That is not the difference. The difference is someone got a loan from their parent to start a tech company and to go work at that tech company and then take it to another level. And then they took that to another level by simply exploiting people who look like you and me.
Well,
Wow.
wow, I felt like that. I just think he just gave us a lesson, man. I felt that's like one of the lessons. That's one of the lessons our graduate students need to hear. Kind of, I mean, we say it in bits and pieces, but you say it so eloquently in one place. That's absolutely fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah. So, Kirk, let me ask you if you can just go into the 4 pillars and just hear some nuggets from Senator Peters in terms of how he thinks about each of these pillars.
Yeah, well, I think that would be good, and I know we committed to keep you to. I guess there was a commitment that we keep you to an hour, so we're bumping up against that. So can you reflect, Senator Peters, a little bit on each of the pillars and the priorities that emerge therefrom, and what your hope, briefly what your hope is for the respective pillar elements.
And let me also say that it's our ambition to ask you and the kind of the administrative apparatus of the Black Caucus to have access to the sponsors to be able to go into depth in each of these pillars over the series of episodes, to be able to not only ask them to help us to understand the pillar better, but to bring questions and concerns that the person who might be walking down 87th Street or in Ullum in Southern Illinois, what they might have to ask the leadership. So let me just ask you to go with the Comprehensive Criminal Justice Reform Package first.
Yeah, so that's the one I know more than almost anything. And, I think the sort of spark that led to the 4 pillars comes out of the fact that, yes, the pandemic, the economic crisis, but the Black Lives Matter and the protests that happened after the murder of George Floyd on tape. We had to watch that brutality. And so what we know is that people wanted to see changes within policing and public safety. And that pillar is based, that's led by a whole host of organizations, from the End Money Bond Coalition, the ACLU, John Howard Association, and essentially the idea there is that we need to change use of force standards. We need to change accountability, particularly around certification in policing and our pretrial justice system, so that we don't have people who are locked up simply because they're poor, especially if they're poor, Black, and a woman. So the criminal justice pillar is, I look at it as 10 years of a decade or more of policies that have been introduced, but hit with a roadblock because people said it's unrealistic or I have worries about whatever, being able to be put into what became the Safety Act. And it's to include in there prison gerrymandering, right? In the next go round of redistricting, prison gerrymandering will be something that's illegal in the state. So it's a pretty transformative piece of legislation built on the idea that the way we've been doing public safety has continued to fail and let us down.
And so, can you comment? And so that gives us a sense of the priorities of the criminal justice pillar. Can you comment? I know you say you know or work with others less, but do you have any general reflections on the other pillars and any thoughts about emerging priorities and kind of objectives?
Yeah, so I'll go in order. Kim Lightford, had a vision when it came to education. This is a vision that's deep for her. She's worked on education issues her entire career. She understands there's a huge gap when it comes to education, that there is a, quote unquote, achievement gap when it comes to education, particularly the time and energy spent both on those who are learning in the classroom and those who are teaching, And so she really sort of focused on trying to close that achievement gap and then create equity, particularly with the Freedom School movement and expanding freedom schools throughout the state, to make sure that you need to know your history. B, so you need to know where you come from. You need to know where you are, and that helps you develop the vision for where you're going. And I think in education, particularly around the Freedom School piece, that's something that she focused on. But again, her main focus was the idea of reducing the achievement gap. And that means more time in the classroom, more in-depth conversations, social and emotional learning components that were needed, particularly for those who are experiencing trauma. Then the healthcare pillar, which is something that Leader Hunter and Representative Camille Lilly worked on. I mean, there's a few things. A, we know study after study shows how Black maternal health is, that if you're a Black woman, you are often dismissed by our healthcare system. She really focused on Black maternal health, accountability on Black maternal health. Then she also expanded funding when it comes to kidney diseases, so particularly dialysis. We know that some of the more disappointing side of things is the dialysis centers in the community. But that's a real problem, and to be able to study and invest and to have that covered was something that was vitally important to the healthcare pillar. And then, of course, the safety net hospital thing. What we know is that safety net hospitals close, and then you're stuck having to go to a tertiary hospital, and the tertiary hospital, so the main hospital, doesn't really want to see you to begin with. And then we continue to have both a healthcare crisis and a Medicaid crisis at the same time. So making sure there's accountability when it comes to safety net hospitals, particularly around closures. And then the economic pillar. So a key part was equity in the workplace, making sure there's representation in the workplace, making sure there's representation in state funding, particularly our university systems. And then on top of that, capping payday lenders at 36%. There are still people to this day who are going to fight to try to figure out any loophole to use regressive lending tactics to lock people into some serious debt. Now, what's interesting to me is that, let's say, for example, I talk about bond, right? So you charge someone excessive bail, but they're broke. They're going to go to a payday lender who's going to charge them an excessive interest rate. Bond, payday lender, locked in poverty. So these things are all somewhat interconnected. Let's just connect this even more. Bond, high interest rates, locked in poverty, struggling to put food on your table. Your kid doesn't have any food. They go to school. They're distracted at school. They act out in school. Boom, we create another piece to the system.
That's right.
Right? Your kid's not getting the things that you can't afford the food. Your grocery store has been closed. You're not eating as healthy, but also your safety net hospital is not nearby. And there might be a clinic that may or may not be open at the time that you're going to be able to be there because you are working two jobs. Literally, these all are part of one overall system hitting at these intersections. And I think the best way to look at this is by reducing the burdens in terms of the criminal justice system, the criminal legal system, reducing the burdens when it comes to financialization and what you need financially, reducing the burdens when it comes to healthcare access and the care that you get, and reducing the burdens when it comes to how you're treating your education is an important step to give people what I would like to say, and I've said it before, is public safety for all. And I think that it's important for any of us to not cede who gets to determine what's safe or not. And I will say that if the FOP president wants to tell me that they're keeping us safe, I can look at every Monday's news conference that tells me that that is not true. We know what keeps people safe. Anybody who's been to Kenilworth, Illinois, can tell you what safety looks like. And it's a very beautiful thing. It seems like a nice home with a school that has a well-funded orchestra program, a well-funded biology program, and it has, you can walk down the street. You have 5 metro stations within blocks of you, and you have power in your workplace. You combine all of that, you have a safe community. You don't have any of that, you're not going to have a safe community.
Well, let me just say, Senator Peters, you couldn't have, I see why you are the chair I think your integrated vision, your understanding of the interconnections between the benefits and burdens of systems, and your appreciation for ways in which we need to disaggregate the inequality from those systems is just very impressive. So I just want to thank you. You've said a lot today, so I'm wondering if there's any final thoughts that you might have, any final reflections in the context of your leadership role, and and ask what you'd like to see happen in the community and what the community can do for you in supporting your role, and what the community might be able to do for the Black Caucus in supporting these larger efforts that they're trying to engage in.
So let me first say, I talk a lot. I was born deaf, I have speech impediments, and I'm a politician. Those are like the worst things to do, to put someone on a mic. And I feel like I've had 36 years of wanting to say everything I can that's inside my head. I've been told by my comms people that I'm long-winded, and that's going to get me in trouble. Might not, just being honest. And I think that it's important to say it's not what the community wants from me. I think it's an inverse on what Kennedy said. And that is, you got to ask what your government can do for you, and to demand that. It's too much. I think the responsibility that I think is on all of us is to make the demands of institutions and systems that are supposed to look out for us and supposed to represent us. So the one thing I would ever say to anybody in the community is, it's okay to organize. It's okay to get loud. It's okay to let people know how you're feeling, because for 30 to 40 years, and for generations longer than that, but for the last 30 or 40 years, that sort of belief and support in community has been whittled down, and people have found outlets for their community. And sometimes it's a locked gate, or it's a basketball hoop that's been taken off of a backboard, or it's some level of incarceration, and community continues to prevail. And now community needs to understand that they need to prevail in government, and government needs to look out for them.
So it sounds like you're saying we should be getting good trouble.
Getting good trouble. We need to bring back good trouble. And here's what I'll say. I don't want too many people using good trouble as a hashtag. I did civil disobedience twice in my life. I did it around Rauner's budget at the Chicago Board of Trade, and I did it at a Walmart over $15 an hour. I want some good trouble, and I don't want it to just be a hashtag. There better be some door knocking, some demands,
there you go,
and some plan to govern.
There you go. So Hubert, I know we're wrapping up. Wanted to know if you had any final thoughts for this engaged, powerful young man.
Yeah. So, often, we walk down the streets of the communities in which we live, and we're concerned about certain things. I know that I have some family members who are impacted by the pandemic. So questions that I have, we are going to be talking about on the show about the hesitancy in terms of, the vaccine. Another concern is, safely walking down the street. And because of that, there's a book that I'm reading at the moment, and I don't know if you have read it, but I'm just going to kind of tout it on the show. And it's called High Conflict. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't.
Very good book. Some of the main characters in the book are some of the people who are trying to deal with youth and violence in our community. So it's just something that I would recommend to you and to our listeners and readers. The title of the book is High Conflict. The author is Amanda Ripley. Just really good understanding of where we find ourselves, both in terms of local conflict and global conflict.
Yeah, and
it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. And I should say, just so the audience knows, we're going to be interviewing folks from CRED, which is an organization that does work in violence interruption. We're going to have Arnie Duncan show, Curtis Toller, and some others
all
from
people
CRED,
who are characters in this book.
Yeah, so we'll have opportunities for the audience to hear those perspectives as well. Senator, you've been overly generous with your time. I'm so impressed. Just having had the opportunity to meet you, my day has been proved multifold. I want to thank you for that. And I too am both challenged. I don't know if it's a gift or a curse with talking too much. I'm often accused of that. But, as a lawyer and a university professor, that's part of the challenge, I think. But I want to, again, thank you for all that you do, all your leadership capacity and skills, and what you have what I think the future holds for the kind of work that you can do in Illinois. So thank you.
Manchester United.
No, I can't handle you being a Manchester United supporter. That's so depressing. Your boy Leon Bailey's now going to be at Aston Villa. You got to support Villa. You can't leave Leon Bailey high and dry. That's just disrespectful.
That's funny. Well, thank you, Senator Peters, and we appreciate you. And we'll keep you in mind. I think we're going to be watching you very closely. So I know there'll be other opportunities for us to engage.
Definitely. Thank you guys for having me. This was a great conversation. I appreciate you listening to every word that came out of my mouth.
And we did, intently.
And the Black Dispatch is all about discussion. So yes. We will invite you back, definitely.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.